All right. Hey there, folks. So even with convention signings and other live events back on track, I figured I would keep bringing book tour to you. So welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. So every now and then, I like to break the format from our usual, the way we usually do things, and I do something just a little bit different, which is my prerogative because it's my show. And if you're watching tonight, it means that you have an interest in horror, science, and all things creepy, spooky, and possibly true. Well, we are writers, so mostly true anyway. So please welcome our guests tonight, the guys from the brand new audio only podcast, the Spooky Science Lab. And first up on Team Spooky is my pal, Nicholas Kaufmann. Nick is a horror and suspense author of novels and short fiction whose work has been nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, Thriller Award, Shirley Jackson Award, and Dragon Award. Oh my awards. His works include the bestsellers 100 Fathoms Below and The Hungry Earth, and has written for Zombies vs. Robots, The Rocketeer, and Warhammer. Welcome back, Nick.
Thank you so much, Russ. It's a pleasure to be here talking about one of the things that's near and dear to my heart, which is strange but true science.
All right. Now, rounding out Team Spooky is David Wellington. Dave is the author of more than 20 science fiction, horror, and fantasy novels, as well as comic books and video games. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thanks, Russ. I'm happy to be here too. Mostly just talk about weird shit.
All right. Well, you came to the right place. All right. Just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free, and I encourage you to send notes or questions you have for Team Spooky in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. All right. So we're
I
going to
love that you're calling us Team Spooky.
Yes. Well, what else would I call you? All right. So you guys are starting something new, bizarre, and pretty cool in my mind. But before we get into that, so talk to me about, how do you guys actually know each other? And more importantly, is that a good thing? Give me a little context here.
I've known Nick for what, 20 years now?
It's got to be. We met at the World Horror Convention in San Francisco, if I believe.
Yeah,
if
was
right.
that 2004 or 2005?
2000. Oh gosh, I don't know. When did Monster Island come out? Because you were promoting it then.
It doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter what year it was. It's been 20 years. It feels like it. No, Nick and I have been friends for a long time. We were introduced by Monica Kubler, who was the editor, one of the editors of a Rue Morgue magazine at the World Horror Convention in San Francisco.
And then we realized that we both lived in New York City, so we decided to keep hanging out when we got back home.
Okay. And she looked at both of us and she's like, "You guys are going to get along," and we have.
Yeah, she saw that we were both, aging nerds, and decided that we would make a good team. But
wow, she thought you were aging nerds 20 years ago. God, what does that say about you
now? Right.
Fair enough.
Now you're just old. Now you're old nerds.
Yeah, we are.
No argument there.
Okay.
But one of the more interesting things that many people may not know is that Dave actually also introduced me to my wife.
And you're in his debt, or you're plotting your revenge?
I'm very much in his debt.
Yeah.
Dave was actually the witness at our wedding at City Hall as well. So we've he's an integral part of my life, and so I feel like this podcast is just a natural extension of the friendship and the rapport that we have.
All right. So you guys have been a couple of. So Nick, you're more of a, you're really kind of more like horror. Dave, you're a little bit more sci-fi and horror and some fantasy. So what is it about? So just for context for those working home. So the last thing that I ever thought about myself ever, that I would be leaning deeper and deeper and deeper into horror. When I grew up, I was not a horror guy at all. Didn't read it, didn't watch it, didn't like it. I get scared easily at movies and books, hated it. It was never my thing. And then somewhere along the line, I started drifting in the last few years, drifting a little bit more and just finding that my own writing is it just tends to run darker. And I found myself in the horror community and increasingly becoming part of that world. But I don't have the lifelong, you talk about science fiction and fantasy and crime and action and thrillers and superheroes. That's been my whole life, but not horror. So I don't have I liked some of the classics. I love The Omen, Nightmare on Elm Street, Jaws, Poltergeist, some of those classics, which are just kind of great movies aside from the fact that they're horror, but I don't have the wealth of knowledge that you guys do. And what I'm continually fascinated about, and I think I'm starting to understand it a lot better than I used to, as I get to hang around with you guys a bit more, and now I'm becoming one of those people. What is it about horror and spooky and creepy elements, that you like, and why do you like it? Like, what's the appeal to you, and how did that particular thread pull you guys together? So Dave, why don't you start me off here?
Oh wow, this is something I think about all the time, and I still don't have a good answer. Horror is weird. You shouldn't be good. Like, you shouldn't like horror. Right thinking normal people should not ever like a horror story. It just shouldn't work at all. And yet, like, if you look, I just did a thing. I did a poetry anthology with Jonathan Mayberry, and I looked at the earliest known poem on Earth. Right, this is an Egyptian story about a shipwrecked sailor who meets a giant snake. It's There's not much to it, but it's a horror story. It's a horror story with a monster. It's got a big old monster, and it's the first recorded piece of poetry that we have. If you look at the first piece of sculpture that human beings ever made, it's a guy with a lion head. It's a monster, right? This is something we have always been fascinated by. This is something that human beings are just enthralled by, and we always will be. I think it's like, whenever you talk about how kids love dinosaurs because kids are small and squishy and dinosaurs are not, right? So I think there is something to that. It's like you like stories about the thing that's like more powerful than you, the more dangerous, the bigger thing, the scarier thing. Because it's a power fantasy, right? But at the same time, a good horror story leaves you feeling vulnerable because it reminds you constantly that nope, you're the squishy one, you're the little one.
So that's
And
actually that's
yeah,
that's interesting. Because I've asked this question many times over the last several years, and I've gotten different kinds of answers. But you're the first person who kind of ever really said it. You framed it up like that. That horror is as power fantasy, yet conversely, also placing you in a position of vulnerability. So
yeah, I like to say
just
that.
real quick, Nick, I kind of want to hear your side of that too. So talk to me a little bit about that dichotomy of the vulnerable. So how do you find yourself in a position to feel vulnerable yet attracted to power? Is that it? Is it that because you feel vulnerable, you're attracted to the power so that you don't feel vulnerable? Is it one of those situations where you can have multiple feelings and thoughts simultaneously, even if they contradict?
Sure, I think it is a simultaneous contradiction, very much so. Um, uh, People enjoy reading and watching horror to face their fears in a way that is safe and is distanced from the danger. And even if the main character doesn't survive the story, you as the reader or viewer have survived the story. So you're that much more powerful in the face of the thing that you are afraid of. At the same time, when people watch, say, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, they're really identifying with Freddy and not the
Pretty,
victims.
yep.
And that's the power fantasy there. That's like you're taking out in the form of Freddy, you are taking out the people in your own life that you don't like.
I think the same thing with Jason Voorhees, like with any slasher, right? People identify with slashers, weirdly enough. Like, the more faceless, the more menacing and silent and empty the slasher is, the more people cheer for them. I think, the one
Really?
exception I think might be Michael Myers. And I think that's a testament to what Carpenter achieved in Halloween, is the fact that people don't want to know more about Michael Myers. Whenever anybody tries to give Michael Myers a backstory, it always
It's
fails.
terrible.
Yeah. People want that void. They want the blank mask that they can project themselves onto.
Wait, so
They can
hang on.
project themselves.
But this is what I've been really after for years. And I feel like after years of asking this question, I'm sort of peeling away a layer that I hadn't considered before. And it's not because I think I'm discovering anything unique. It's just it's new to me. So let's think about this for a second, because I want to explore this a little bit more. So on the one hand, like we all have our fears, our vulnerabilities, things that scare us, anxieties, trauma, repressed feelings, memories, whatever, feelings of vulnerability, inadequacy, frustration, et cetera, et cetera. A madman or a crazy person, a monster, whatever, is sort of, center stage. And on the surface, and maybe more than the surface, they are the villain, right? They're doing these kind of really terrible, violent, horrible things. So for me personally, and I don't watch enough horror to really sort of know, and it may just be that if I watched more, maybe it would click for me differently, but I'm the one, shivering with the covering my eyes and ducking beneath the desk. I'm like that. Like and I'll remember this very clearly. When I saw Pet Cemetery, I saw it on TV, and I had a 13-inch TV in my room. And I kept having to turn the channel back and forth because it was giving me so much anxiety. I just couldn't take it. Like when the kid comes out from underneath the bed and slashes the Achilles heel with the knife. Oh, good God. It was just horrifying. I'm like, that's it. I had to turn it off. And then 10 minutes later, once I calmed down, I went back. I got no sense of power in that at all. Like when I see, with the few horror stuff that I watch, I guess I still sort of feel like I'm I'm the one being hunted. I don't identify with Freddy at all. But so just talk to me about that part of it, because like it'd be one thing if, let's say, Freddy was going after, I mean, essentially, like, let's take Dexter for an example. Dexter is a lunatic, right? He does terrible things, but essentially he's Batman to us, right? He's like Batman one step removed. So I identify with that kind of power, like, oh yeah, he's taking out the trash. And I get that. Yes, there's collateral damage, but he never intentionally goes after somebody innocent. Never ever. But Freddy, Jason at all, they're just going after the kind of like the innocent. So what's the appeal? I guess I still don't quite, I'm not connecting the dots in my own mind about how do you morph this, let's call this deranged person or a monster, even if it's like an actual monster. How does that morph into, I can identify with the power of that character, even though they're sort of going after the innocents? I guess I can't connect the dots in my own head.
I don't think it's a 1-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
I don't think you're putting yourself, you're saying I am Michael Myers. And
right.
By the way, I would actually say that Freddy and Jason serve different purposes. We identify with Freddy because he makes us laugh, and he's creative, and he's funny.
Right.
We're not
true.
identifying with Jason. We are, because Jason is a blank slate.
Right.
There's nothing going on behind that hockey mask. You
right.
can pour any fear into Jason that you are facing. It's not necessarily a fear that you will be attacked by a masked man with a knife.
Right.
Horror tends to be very metaphorical. So whatever it is you're scared of can be poured into that Jason shape. And then at the end of the movie, you've survived. You've survived because of that, safe distance from the movie itself, from the story. You've survived that experience.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, let's say Jason, just using that example, Jason is an empty vessel. I am transferring my own fears, my anxieties, my frustrations, my repressions.
Yeah.
I am
unconsciously.
Yes,
unconsciously.
Correct. I'm pouring them into this empty vessel, letting go of them for the moment. Jason goes and does whatever he does. And then at the end of the movie, Jason is either, well, whatever happens to Jason, I walk away having sort of offloaded some of my anxieties, even if it's only for 90 minutes or 2 hours, and I get that sort of that dissonance, that break from it, and it allows me to experience that fear, that anxiety, that trauma, kind of with a little more detachment. And even if there's some anxiety that swells up during it, I walk away and go, whew, wow, that was something. Is that kind of what you're saying here?
That's exactly right. And I think a lot of it also has to do with choice. If you had I assume you did not make a choice to watch Pet Sematary on that 13-inch television. You found it as you were flipping around. Had you
I
put
might
in the
have.
video yourself,
Right.
you're
True.
making a more conscious choice, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to do this.
Oh, that's true. Right. Okay. You're right. That's a good point, actually. And it's interesting because I think that's something that, broadly speaking, we don't do much anymore. Right. It used to be that you sat down in front of the TV and whatever was on, you flipped around and whatever was on was on. You only had so many choices. But now then it was VHS and then DVDs and Blu-rays and now streaming. It's not like, oh, what do I stumble into? It's, oh, anything I'm going to watch, I'm going to choose to watch it from the beginning. I didn't fall. It's not like, oh, great. Oh, Poltergeist is on. It's halfway through. Oh, what a great scene. Whatever. You're always almost starting at the beginning, right?
And I think that's one of the reasons why the best way to watch horror is still in the movie theater. Because it's going to happen and you can't stop it. You can't pause it. You can't just decide, oh, I'm going to watch Powerpuff Girls for 20 minutes and calm down. You're stuck with this thing that is playing out in its own time. And so that's why I find that, yeah, like horror is great streaming, whatever. I mean, of course, I'll go back and watch all the Halloween movies in a row, on Halloween, on AMC or whatever. But
You just described my worst nightmare.
okay. I find that if I can actually go to a movie theater and sit in a dark room and watch a movie for an hour and a half without a break, without a pause, right? That's when it works the best. Because I think horror, like Nick and Russ, you both pointed out this thing that it's something you choose, and that is a big part of it. You've chosen to go through this ordeal, right? It's not thrust upon you. It's not like in real life where bad things just happen. You've actually made this conscious choice. Oh, I'm gonna dare myself to sit through this thing and see if I can take it. And you can, and then it's over, and you go, whew, yeah, exactly. You're relieved because you have proven to yourself that you are more powerful than this thing you were afraid of.
Okay. All right. So, I guess and this is actually for me really helpful. It's sort of, now I get the parallel to when people say it's like going on a roller coaster, right? You don't accidentally go on a roller coaster. It's either you go on it or you don't, right? And you choose to go on this thing that's going to make you puke or spin you upside down or scare the crap out of you. But you're pretty confident anyway that you're going to walk away.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right, cool. All right. So let's kind of dive into a little bit more about what you guys are up to. So you guys are sort of doing this new thing where, you're mixing horror, horror, sci-fi, and science. And I'm curious, when you guys started talking, when I'm assuming that over the course of 20 years, you guys just jibber jabber and hang out, just like you nerd out about what you could, just as easily as you could be nerding out about Star Wars or whatever, you're nerding out about, oh, did you see this, microbe that ate off a cat's face, or like whatever it is, and other conversation, right?
Yes, we send each other links to stories like that all the time.
Right. So here's my question. When was the first time you had that moment? The one where where one of you says something and the other one of you says a thing, and then you kind of exchange kind of coy glances and you say, like, are we really doing this?
I can't remember a starting point for that, because again, we've been friends for 20 years. But I do remember when the idea for the podcast was birthed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I was doing a talk at the Flying Fox Tavern in Ridgewood, Queens. They have a series there called The House of No, and No is spelled K-N-O-W. And it's a lecture series, but with slides and whatnot. And I did a show called The Wild World of Weird Science, because I had come up with all of these weird facts when I was writing the Dr. Laura Powell novels. And then Dave and his wife came to see the show. And afterwards, we were talking, and this idea of joining forces was born.
Okay.
Yeah, Nick has it exactly right. So he gave this presentation that then became, it's the same subject of our first episode of our podcast, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things I talked about at the presentation is actually the first episode.
And it's this amazing story, which I'm not going to spoil. You're going to have to listen to this thing to hear this story, and you really want to, because it's a great story. But so he gave this amazing presentation, and then afterwards he came over and sat down with me, and he was like, and I was like, wow, that was just a great story. I really enjoyed hearing that. And he said, yeah, I'm thinking about doing it as a podcast. And I said, oh, I would listen to that. And he said, do you want to co-host? Just like that. And instantly I was like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
No
yeah, it just was born from in that moment.
Yeah, it was just that, it sounded like that much fun.
All right, so talk to me about, and just kind of give us a little, just a quick overview. What is the Spooky Science Lab? Like, what's it all about?
So basically, we are two authors who do way too much research when we write our books. So we're both nerds. We love learning things, but that means, and it's also a great way to procrastinate when you're writing.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh, I gotta do more research. Yeah. Do 8 more hours of research on, what happens if you open the airlock of the space station. And
let's find out.
Exactly. And so we end up doing way more research than we need to write the books. So we end up with all these great stories that are never going to fit into a book. And they're just lost, right? They're just gone. Like, oh, there's something I know about that I'm never going to use again.
Right.
And so we just thought about this and we were like, well, we can just tell these stories as, as facts. It doesn't have to be worked into a giant work of fiction. It could just be telling each other these stories.
And I didn't, they were not lost for me, the research I didn't use, because I would always, like if we were out to dinner with friends or something, I would always just talk until I was blue in the face about, oh, did you guys know about this particular fungus or this kind of fish? And I would see my friend's eyes sort of glaze over because I'd been talking for 45 minutes. So I found a use for it before the podcast.
Hang on one second, Nick. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to have to cancel my reservation with Kaufmann. Yeah, I don't think I can eat with this guy.
This would happen so often that we started calling Nick is now called our fungus friend.
Oh, that's it. That's it. Fungus friend Kaufmann. That's it.
I embrace it. I embrace my fungus friend status.
All right. So Nick,
I always find myself when I'm out and about, people will talk to me about space stuff and because you do. Right. And somebody will say, well, if you fall out of the airlock, your eyes will explode and your blood will boil and all this stuff. And I'm like, well, and I'm the one who goes, well, actually, no, it wouldn't happen that way. And so yeah, Spooky Science Lab is us using this stuff, but also just like telling each other stories. And then, Nick always manages to just really bum me out with his stories.
Speaking of which, so Nick, when it comes to Team Spooky, you're more of the bug and creepy crawly guy. So
yeah,
talk to me about your fascination with fungus and spores and bugs and all these icky critters that just absolutely just give me the heebie-jeebies. Like, why are you so fascinated with it?
I'm fascinated by them, but they also give me the heebie-jeebies. I don't like insects. I don't like seeing a bug in my house. I don't like any of that. But when I was researching fungi for The Hungry Earth, I just kept finding more and more fascinating topics. And this whole idea of fungus insect mutualism, which is when they supposedly work together to the greater good. And I was just so fascinated by all of it. I started to voraciously research fungus, which is how I wound up being Dave's fungus friend.
So hang on a second. So you'll have to excuse me for a second. So like I understand that fungus is actually, it's part of our ecosystem and it's really everywhere, whether we know it or not. And I get that you research it, but why are you fascinated by it? That's what I want.
Because this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I think fungus is intelligent.
Okay.
But it's not a human intelligence. I think it is time perhaps for us to take our definition of what is intelligence beyond beyond just human.
Oh, wait a second. I see what this is going on. When he says fungus is intelligent, this is his way of saying you're tripping on caps right now, is really what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that I'm actually 3 mushrooms in a trench coat. But you know,
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
No. So
after reading The Hungry Earth, I don't know if I'm ever gonna. I don't know if I'm okay with trying mushrooms.
Wait,
that's for me.
So hang on, Nick. Stick with the thread for a minute, though. So fungus is intelligent, right? And there's a lot of research about that, right? I mean, certainly, it went to sort of an extreme, but even in, some of the new Star Trek, they really play up that sort of mycelial network, right? Which is even Stamets is named after the real researcher Stamets, right? So talk to me about the intelligence of fungus. I want to hear about this.
So this could be a 5-hour conversation, but
do less.
Just
do
briefly.
Less.
Yeah.
You had to set off the fungus friend. Okay.
Yeah. No. Everyone just buckle in. No. So the first thing I learned about when I was reading about fungus and how fascinating it is was something called the Wood Wide Web. So the fungus itself, we think of fungus as a mushroom, but that's just the fruiting body of the fungus. That's essentially its genitalia. So think about that next time you have, sauteed mushrooms. But the fungus itself is a series of sort of fibers under the ground called hyphae. And these things connect to the root systems of trees. And they barter with the tree for various nutrients. And if they find a tree, if they find a tree that will give them more nutrients in return for the nutrients they're giving, they'll go and deal with that tree instead. And there's all this fascinating data about forest fires where this mycelial network that they call the Wood Wide Web can alert trees that are farther away from the fire that there's a fire happening. And then the tree will, I guess, just scream because I don't think they can run. So, I don't know.
Well, at least not while you're watching.
Right. But they can, no, I mean, they can, I don't know, they have certain defenses.
But this is all very Swamp Thing, right?
Very much so. And there's an instance of fungal ant mutualism with the leafcutter ants of the South American jungles, where so these leafcutter ants, you might think that they're eating the leaves that they cut off the trees, but they're not. They actually feed on the tree sap. What they do is they bring these leaves back to their hive, their nest, and in the center of their nest is a fungus, a particular kind of fungus, which they then feed the leaves to. And this has been going on for millions of years, much longer than humankind has been doing any sort of farming or existed. And it's gotten to the point where the ants and this fungus are so in tune that the ants know when the fungus doesn't like a certain kind of leaf, and they strike it from the menu.
Oh God.
They're that much in tune. And in return, I mean, the fungus gets, all sorts of things. It gets fed, it gets protected, it has shelter in this nest. And in return, what it does is it allows ant larvae to feed on it sometimes.
So the ants and the fungi are basically like joint restaurateurs of the woods.
Sort of, except they call it mutualism, but I really think the fungus is getting a lot more out of this than the ants are.
Okay. All right.
The fungus gets like a place to live that's safe, and the ants are just basically slaving away all day to bring it the leaves that it likes.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So Dave, you're more of the galactic horror guy of the two of you. So what fascinates you about all the ways in which the universe is basically just trying to kill us?
Well, that's the thing. So we call the podcast the Spooky Science Lab, and the idea was we were coming up with like horrific science topics. And what I kept finding as I was preparing for the podcast was that all the stories I was coming up with, in the end, they were terrifying. People were dying horribly, but also they were wonderful. They were beautiful. They were incredible. And that's the thing about space, is it is absolutely mind-blowingly dangerous as space is, as much as you would die if you literally just left Earth's atmosphere for 10 minutes. Like, it's still beautiful. It is wonderful, right? In the full term of what that means. It is awesome in that it inspires awe. The gigantic size of the universe, all the crazy stuff that's going on out there, this sort of like endless dance of elements and radiation.
Wait. So hang on a second. So
Yeah.
let's be a little bit more granular. You're saying all this crazy, wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Make it real for me.
So one of the podcast topics we did is what would happen if Nick fell into a black hole. Nick is my experimental subject.
Wait, when you say fell.
Yeah.
Pushed.
Okay, yeah.
Pushed.
If I threw him into a black hole.
Okay.
And he died almost instantly. So I had to bring him back, and then I put him in a magic spacesuit so he wouldn't die instantly. But then the story just kept getting worse and worse about what would happen to you.
Okay, but this is what I'm talking about. This is what tell me about the worst. I want to understand. Get details. If we're killing Nick, I want a ringside seat here.
So everybody thinks that a black hole is just like this big shiny black marble in space. But in fact, if you've ever seen Interstellar, or if you've seen sort of like the models of black holes we have now, where it looks kind of like an evil version of Saturn, right? So you've got this black sphere in the middle that's got this orange ring around it. That ring is called an accretion disk, and it's matter that is slowly falling into the black hole like it's going down a bathtub drain. And the thing is, it goes faster and faster the closer it gets to the black hole, until it's moving about a third of the speed of light. And it ends up being millions of degrees hot and giving off so much radiation that Nick couldn't even get close to the black hole. He was just fried to a crisp, like half a light year out. But
that's why I needed the magic spacesuit.
And once I gave him the magic spacesuit, then he had to worry about something worse, which is called spaghettification. And this is the idea that when you get close to a black hole, if you're falling in feet first, right, the gravity of the black hole is so strong that it's pulling your feet harder than it pulls you on your head. So it stretches you out like taffy, like a Stretch Armstrong.
So this is how the Fantastic Four got their start, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So I pointed out to Nick that, the human body is pretty stretchy. Like skin stretches pretty good.
Really? I don't know about that one.
Yeah,
it's not this stretchy.
Okay.
But that, every bone in his body would be shattered pretty much instantly. And he didn't seem to like that. So,
No, I found this all very disturbing.
I mean, we're enjoying it.
But then the ending of the story, right? The ending of the story, when he actually gets inside the black hole, is just so fascinating to me.
Because
that's when the laws of physics just break down. Time and space stops meaning anything. So for somebody on the outside watching Nick fall into this black hole, it looks like he's like flying down into this black hole, and then suddenly he just stops. And he hovers there just outside the black hole forever, or at least trillions of years.
Right, time just stops for me.
Yeah, from an outside perspective, Nick is just hovering there forever, never getting any closer. And Nick doesn't experience this quite the same way. And you can listen to the podcast here about what happens next after that. But it's
gruesome.
It's pretty gruesome. And it's fast, but it's fascinating. It's like, this is the secrets of the universe. This is like the absolute stuff you were not meant to know. The stuff that has been hidden from you or whatever, except it isn't, because we can just figure it out by looking through telescopes.
So I guess one of my questions, so you said, that when this happens, it sort of defies the laws of physics and or astrophysics, whatever their proper term may be. But I would sort of argue, and it's funny because we use this term so often, but is it that it defies the laws of physics, or it defies the laws of physics as we understand them?
Well, we've got a pretty good idea about the math of what's going on.
But here's my question though, and I'm just sort of poking at you. But here's the thing: do we actually have a good idea of the math, or do we just think we do?
So we have a pretty strong grasp on the math, but the math tells you things that seem impossible. So the answer is both. Okay, so we have a pretty good model of how black holes work. What we don't know is the big question of what's inside. So inside a black hole is something called a singularity. And Einstein wrote a bunch of equations about how you describe a singularity. The problem is that one of the equations says, oh, and by the way, mass, gravity, etc., all become infinite. Time becomes zero. And what does that mean? And the thing is, we can never actually find out. So yeah, there is a mystery there. It could be that the center of a black hole is a gateway to another universe. Or it could be you just die. It could be you just die horribly. We just don't know. And it'll be a very long time before we can actually figure out by throwing Nick into a real black hole.
But I say we give it a shot.
I'm up for anything. But I think what's interesting is that our minds cannot conceive of what the math is telling us.
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating. What the math says, this is happening inside a black hole, and we're like, I don't understand what that means.
Yes.
Just following that thread, Nick, and then I know you guys know I'm just busting your balls, but when you say our minds cannot comprehend the math, we can't crack it. But here's what I wonder often, is it that we can't or we can't yet? There's a lot of theories that we only, as human beings, we only access 10% or less of the human mind's actual potential. We just haven't figured out how to crack that our own our own code. I wonder if all the answers are actually inside the human mind. We just don't know how to access the files.
It's certainly possible, and this idea that we only use a percentage of our potential in our brain is certainly a science fiction trope, whether it's true or not. And more often than not,
I don't know about science fiction. I mean, if you just look outside your front door, it seems to me that we don't use our brains that well.
that I can agree with. It's just funny to me that there's this idea that if we unlock that other percentage of our brain, we'll have telekinesis or telepathy. And I don't think it's going to go that way. I think what it would actually do is give us a greater understanding of things like physics and math and how the universe works. So yeah, I guess it's not that we can't comprehend it. It's that we can't comprehend it yet.
I will disagree.
with
So the thing is, first off, this idea that we use 10% of our brains, it's like you may be using 10% of your brain at any given moment, but your whole brain does get used. It's just different parts of it are being used at different times. Now, there's a difference between if you're trying to solve a crossword puzzle or you're trying to catch a baseball, okay? There's a difference between driving a car and what parts of your brain you're using while you're driving a car versus what parts of your brain you're using when you fall in love, right? That seems pretty self-evident. So the point is, all of your brain does get used, just not all at once. And even then, even the parts that aren't getting used, they're still active and they're still doing things. They're just in the background. Your brain, your mind, right? That part of you that you think of as you, your personality and so on, is really good at focusing on different kinds of tasks. Now, that doesn't mean that we're smart. It doesn't mean that we're all secretly brilliant and we just need to unlock it. The brain is evolved to do very specific things. And so when we say there are some parts of science we will never understand, I think that's a real thing. So we think about, we always say, or scientists say, that our universe has 4 dimensions, not just 3, right? Not just length, width, and breadth, but there is an additional 4th dimension to the shape of the universe. Where is it? What direction is it? You can't see it. You can't touch it. You can't imagine it because you didn't evolve to need to know that. You evolved to know how to swing around in trees,
right,
and break open coconuts.
But here's the thing: how do you know that? Let's say you're right. There's a 4th dimension. But how do you, Dave Wellington, know that there's only one more dimension? Why couldn't there be 50 or 100 or a million other dimensions?
So there are theories that there might be 10 or 17. So these are all questions people have asked and have gone into a lot of detail about, way more than I can handle. I am not a mathematician. As we say on the show, we are not scientists. We are enjoyers of science. We are enthusiasts of science.
Absolutely. We have that disclaimer at the start of every episode where we say, just so you know, we are not scientists. You know, we're enthusiasts, and these are stories that we enjoy, and we're probably wrong.
I always like to say on the show, I believe that everything I'm about to say is true.
All right. So I'm cracking the code. The real disclaimer is we don't know what the fuck we're talking about, but we're saying words out loud anyway because we like the sound of our own voices.
Yeah. We don't know what we're talking about, but we're going to set up a Patreon.
All right, guys, that was great. So just real quick. So just to be clear, your podcast is the Spooky Science Lab. Okay. When does it launch? And how can people listen to it?
It launches on April 1st, and I want to be very clear that this is not an April Fool's Day joke. It is a real podcast. It's launching on April 1st, and it will be available wherever you listen to your podcast.
And it's audio only, correct?
It is audio only. Nobody wants to see this.
No, you guys definitely have faces made for radio.
Hey,
thank you.
Hey, look at this guy. So what am I talking about? All right, guys, but now it's a time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel are 7 possible categories, including a few new ones I brought on just for tonight's show. Wherever it lands is what you get, and the categories are the Reanimator, The Truth Is Out There, Haunted House, Bugs in Space, Apocalypse, Alien Nation, and Kick Him in the Junk. All right, Dave, this is the first time on the show, so you're up first. You ready?
Here we go. Sure.
Here we go.
Kick him in the junk.
Round and round. Where does she go? What do we got for you?
Oh,
all right, you got the Reanimator. Oh, I like this one. All right, you have died a gruesome death, but medical student Herbert West has offered to reanimate you with a scary serum. If taken, you have a 50-50 chance of returning to life completely normal or as a zombie-like creature. If, however, you choose to forego the serum, you have a 50-50 chance of going straight to hell. Do you want to be reanimated?
Well, now I've seen this movie. I know how it turns out. No, okay. So, one problem, I'm dead. It's difficult for dead people to give consent. But okay, say that he revives me just enough to ask me this question.
Yes.
Do I take the serum or not? And I have a 50% chance of going to hell. Was I going to hell otherwise?
Well, that's yet to be determined.
Yeah.
That's between you and your maker.
That's here, right? I'm trying to hedge my bets. Like,
oh no, we don't hedge on this show.
I mean, no, I stay dead. That's too big a percentage chance.
All right, so you're going straight to hell. Okay. Oh, good.
Well,
all right.
Oh.
All right, Nick, you're up next.
I chose poorly.
You definitely chose poorly. All right, Nick. You are.
Come on, kick him in the balls.
Oh, all right. Bugs in Space.
Oh, perfect.
This has never been done on the show before, so it's up to you.
Great. Right.
The universe has decided that you need to be taught a lesson. I'm not entirely sure what that lesson is supposed to be, but you're given 2 options. 1, you get locked in a coffin, buried 6 feet underground for 30 minutes straight while covered with a disturbing number of creepy crawling bugs of all kinds skittering all over you. Or you spend an entire week in a tiny spacecraft millions of miles away with no planets or moons in your sight line, no Earth, nothing, with absolutely zero contact with another living soul. That's 7 days, 168 straight hours. So, covered in bugs, buried beneath the ground for a half an hour, or total isolation in the far reaches of space.
This is no contest. Put me in a spaceship so I don't have to deal with other people's bullshit.
Hey, all right.
No contest.
No contest. All right. I'm out of here. Fuck this shit.
I would just nap. I would nap for 7 days.
No
I assume there's a kitchen. So I would nap and snack.
Oh, a kitchen. You assumed incorrectly. you once again, you chose poorly. Okay, that was great. But now it's time where you're gonna pick your poison. I've got 3 choices for you guys, A, B, or C. And I'm not going to tell you what's behind each, but I will say that they're all related to tonight's theme. So, Nick, now you're up first. What do you pick? A, B, or C?
I'm going to go with B because I was a straight B student.
All right. So, B, I like this one. This is Book of a Lifetime. All right. So, this one has a bit of a wind up. So, bear with me. I'm going to give you two options that are going to define the rest of your writing career. You can only pick one. Here are the options. Option number one, your next book is an international bestseller. You will win every award there is. You will make tons of money. Your book gets made into a movie that wins the Academy Award for Best Picture. You can ride the success forever. You will always be that guy. Always. However, every book you write after that, I'm talking every single one, is an absolute dumpster fire. Critically trashed and a commercial zero. You are called a washed up hack who could no longer even string together two cohesive sentences. Or choice number two, you keep writing as you've always done. You are generally well respected, but there won't be any awards in your future and the financial end of things will be minimal. So for up to you, given those two choices, which career path do you pick? Book of a Lifetime or Steady as She Goes?
This is a great question because it assumes I have a career. This is a tough one, actually. There are plenty of authors out there who have that one hit, and then their other books just fail. At the same time, I feel like I'm already sort of living that other choice, which is just steady as you go. Like, never, I've been nominated for 4 literary awards, but I've never won any. I've had books that were bestsellers, but not financially successful.
Quit stalling.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go with the second one. I'm going to stay the course.
Stay the course. Okay. All right. Steady as she goes. Okay. So much for Dare to Dream. All right. So, Dave,
I've chosen poorly.
You've chosen poorly. All right, Dave, you're up. You're up next. You got A or C?
Oof. Let's go with C.
C. Oh, all right. We haven't brought this one out in a while. So, Benjamin's Button. You have two options. Once again, much like Benjamin Button, you can live your life fully in reverse, where you are born incredibly old and then you get younger until you reach your cellular state, or you can relive the life you have now, only knowing that any changes you make in your past, knowing how your life has already unfolded, will change that new life in any number of unpredictable ways, likely resulting in a new life going forward that doesn't quite look like the one that you have now. So which is it? Life in reverse or life do-over?
That's an interesting question. So it took a long time, but I've got a pretty good life now. I'm doing my dream job. I'm married to an incredible woman and have great friends. I think I'm pretty happy how I am right now, and I wouldn't want to redo it with the option of messing that up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll live backwards. Why not? I think it might be interesting to see things as a child, but with adult eyes.
Okay, all right. For a couple of guys who love horror, you don't like to take too many chances. All right, so here we go. Just a quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for Team Spooky, I encourage you put them in the chat box, and we'll get to them in a couple of minutes. All right, guys. So we're gonna get to our advice column. So I'm gonna start with you, Nick. What's the best and worst writing advice you've ever been given?
The best writing advice I've ever been given is the same advice that I give to anyone who asks me for writing advice, and that is simply perseverance. You gotta keep doing it. You'll get better. Oh, the only way to get better is to keep doing it, and you got to develop a thick skin and just keep at it, because one day all those rejections you're getting will turn into an acceptance, and that'll be the greatest day of your writing life.
All right, fair.
The worst advice I got as a horror writer in particular was probably in the early 2000s. So where a lot of my peers told me to stop reading, commercial books from major houses and to start reading more of the small press horror that was coming out at the time. And the reason this was bad advice was because a lot of what I was reading in the small press was garbage. Not to put too fine a point on it. Poorly written, low-hanging fruit when it came to like plot developments, etc. And the things that I had been reading from the major houses, the commercial authors, was much better written and much more interesting. So I wish I had sort of stuck the course and not wasted my time reading 70,000 similar zombie books.
So I hope that's not your way of saying that you don't support indie writers.
No, that's not my way of saying that. No, I am an indie writer.
I know.
I know. I've published with big houses and I've published with smaller houses. It's just at that time it was bad advice, in my opinion. I could have learned more had I continued to read commercial authors than small press authors.
All right, Dave, same for you. Best and worst writing advice.
I'll start out by actually like going on record. Nicholas Kaufmann is a friend to the working man. Like Nicholas Kaufmann.
Nice save.
If you go to these conventions, even like the smaller conventions, the ones where the writers go to, right? That's where you're going to find Nick, and he absolutely is a friend to every writer he's ever met, and will absolutely help anybody out, give anybody advice that when they need it. He's an incredible resource for indie writers, people who are publishing at a different level than he is, etc. Like this man is I do not want people walking away thinking that Nicholas Kaufmann doesn't like indie writers.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that.
No, he knows I was just busting his balls.
All right, so worst advice or best advice, worst advice. So best advice is going to be totally inside baseball. This is something that this is so specific, but it works miracles. Is sentence length. Vary up your sentence lengths and your paragraph lengths as well. When you're writing, don't make every paragraph just a series of sentences that are all 10 words long. Break it up. Use short little sentences when you want to talk loud. Use long sentences when you want to whisper. And same with paragraphs. You can have a paragraph that's 3 pages long that's all exposition and just like detailed description to something. And then you end it with one new paragraph, new sentence. I'm on fire, she screamed. You got people's attention. That is how you modulate with writing, right? If you want to be loud, use short little sentences, tiny little paragraphs. If you want to, but you gotta like break it up. You gotta have some loud, some quiet.
All right, we got
it. That's the best advice.
Worst
advice I ever got. I was in a writing workshop in grad school, and this guy who was the star of the workshop told me that plot was over, that nobody was ever going to write a book with a plot again. It was like writing poetry that rhymed. Right? Nobody writes poetry that rhymes anymore. Nobody's ever going to write a book with a plot anymore. And half the class just went, "Oh, that's really fascinating. What can we learn from this guy?" And I looked him in the eye and I said, that was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. I turned around and walked away because I knew that was just, that was not good advice.
All right. Agreed. All right. So let me see if there's any question. No questions in the chat box for you guys. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen. I've got some goodies for everyone. So bear with me for just a minute and we are going to see what we got. All right. So Dave, talk to me. What am I looking at here?
This is the cover of my latest book, Paradise 1. It's available everywhere right now. It is a work of space horror, and it is definitely horror. This one's pretty gruesome. It's got some really interesting science fictional ideas. This is not just horror, right? This is a fusion of science fiction and horror.
What's the plot? Give me the basics.
Yeah, sure. So the Earth creates its first interstellar colony, a planet called Paradise 1. It's a farming colony. Everybody there they go there to start a new life. They're all excited. And then one day, radio silence. They just cut off all communications. And so our heroes are a team of people who go to find out what happened to this lost colony. And the second they arrive, they find out it is so much worse than they could ever have imagined.
All right, fair enough. Sounds good. Okay, Nick, what do we got going on here?
Hey, that's my book. So that's The Stone Serpent. That's the latest book in the Dr. Laura Powell series of strange science thrillers. And in this one, it involves a small religious sect that's very sort of separate from the rest of society, that is being sort of attacked and preyed upon by these mutant snakes whose venom is able to turn people, is able to petrify people. They petrify their prey. And actually, this is the second book in the series. The third book, which is called The Mind Worms, is actually coming out in 6 days on March 12th of this year. So I'm very excited about that.
All right, very cool. So if you guys want things that are creepy and gross, and well, you know where to find them. All right, as for me, keeping in the spirit of spooky and creepy and space, I'll encourage you to check out Blunt Force Rising. It's the latest novel in my sci-fi thriller series featuring hard-boiled private detective Angela Hardwick. In my mind, Hardwick is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, part Sarah Connor, and a little Twilight Zone mixed in. In Blunt Force Rising, so Hardwick and her protege Eric Whistler are providing extra security on a Galaxy cruise ship, which you can see right down here, which is they're hosting an AI, robotics, and cybernetics conference. But that event kind of quickly devolves into a bitter argument between the pro and the anti-android community. And for me, androids in this book are a surrogate for any group who feels marginalized, with all engendering all sorts of hatred for all sorts of goofy reasons. Anyway, a murder takes place aboard the ship, and it sets off a chain reaction of events, including a violent insurrection that's going to test lives and loyalties and the very notion of humanity itself. It's also a locked room mystery thriller. So if you're up for some close quarters mayhem, excuse me, and a lot of cosmic blood and gore, this one is definitely for you. Blunt Force Ride, it's on sale in ebook and paperback, and I want to be clear. So there are 4 novels in the series, and each one, that's so far, and each one is a standalone novel. So you can read them in any order. And I reintroduce the characters and the world building so you know exactly where you are, so you can jump in. It doesn't matter what order you read the books in. You can start off with any one plot-wise, and you're good to go. And Blunt Force Rising and the rest of the series is available on Amazon and created and published by Crazy 8 Press. All right, guys, that is our show. I want to thank my guests, Nick and Dave, for coming on and talking to us about the Spooky Science Lab and all the gruesome tales that they have coming up starting on April 1st. And I want to thank everyone who's watching at home. I'm your host, Russ Colchamiro, and as always, be gentle, be kind and generous of spirit, and for God's sakes, go read a book. And I'll see you all next week. All right, guys, take care. Bye.
Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, bye.
Good to see everyone. All right.